So this is why atheism doesn't make sense to me. So once upon a time, I tried to be atheist. And I listened to a lot of viewpoints, but what I mostly did is I went at the whole situation with, okay, let's say for a moment that God isn't real. Let's look at, and so what I did is what a lot of atheists do is they remove God from the equation. So now I'm looking through a lens of God isn't real, right? So I can make sense of some things, but then there are some things that don't make sense. Like if I had two equations, one equation was solved for X and one equation was solved for Y, I can solve for X, but solving for Y, I just couldn't figure it out. So over time, I was just like, all right, let's take a step back and reevaluate what God is in these equations. And once I plug in God into the equation, now I can solve for X and I can solve for Y. But what I see a lot of in atheists especially is they're trying to sell this narrative that God isn't real. And I kind of ignored it for a really long time in my life because I was just like, well, the way I was viewing it, because until I became a follower of Christ, I was just like, well, what about all these other religions? Okay? Why are any of these lesser or greater than the other? What are their variables? So I analyzed them. I analyzed the variables of these religions. And there were errors all over the place. They didn't, like, every time I tried to solve for X, it just wouldn't, I couldn't solve for X. And I couldn't solve for Y. None of their equations added up. So then I started following Christ. Now, when it comes to following Christ, well, there's a lot of religions especially here in the US, that claim that they have the real Jesus and the other ones are wrong, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because one can't be right and the other be wrong, especially if you're all kind of talking about the same person. Now, over time, I learned what all those differences were and whatnot. And this goes into my explanation of why atheists don't make sense to me. So I'm going to pick on the Mormon religion because that was the one I was born into, and I know a lot of their dirty little secrets that they sweep under the rug and pretend doesn't happen. So one of the things that doesn't make sense to me that is their tier system for heaven. There's multiple levels of heaven, okay? Well, when you go read the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, nowhere does it talk about any of these different levels of heaven. And I just find that odd. Because out of the 4,000 years that God could have talked about heaven and what heaven entails, he doesn't. He only describes heaven as one place and nothing more. So, how did Mormons get this multiple heaven thing? Well, it only exists if you're talking about including Joseph Smith into the equation. Well, if you plug Joseph Smith into the equation, then you have to take certain aspects of what the Bible is saying and remove them from the equation. or change their value, which then causes the whole thing to just, you wind up not being able to solve for X again, or even solving for Y. You're just, it's conflicting, it's broken, it's not working. So you gotta answer this question, but you can't because you are accepting false values. And if you accept false values, you will never find the true answer. So now we remove all these other forms of Christianity and we only look at what the Bible talks about. And I gotta say, you can solve for X and you can solve for Y. Now there's a atheist guy on YouTube. I don't remember his name. He's I'm pretty sure he's British. I think he's British, and he's very well spoken. But when I listen to him speak, especially to people who are religious, he likes talking in circles. Like, whenever he's given an answer, he doesn't accept the answer. He rejects it. I mean, he's coming from a point of God doesn't exist, so he's going to reject any answer anyways, despite whether or not it is correct, or whether it is real or not real. Like, he brought up the equation for free will, and his equation of free will is, I would have to figure out his name, but and bring it up again so I'm quoting it correctly, but it just didn't make any sense to me, because I'll probably do this again in another video, but it's funny how he removes God from the equation, and then he tries to solve an answer or solve a question, but then he himself can't answer the question, because without just saying, well, this equation is telling me that it's not real, or we don't have free will. And the thing is, there are a ton of questions he asks that he believes he knows the answer to, which is a whole nother ordeal. Just because you think you know an answer, or just because you believe an answer is true, doesn't make it true. Like, there are things in reality that no matter what you do will always remain what they are. It's only because of the human imagination and perspective do things become more or different. But in order for, like, take a tree, for example. A tree is a tree until you turn it into something else. Until you take that tree and you turn it into a chair. Well, in order to get that chair, you have to subtract from that tree. Unless you spend a couple of years of your life constantly shaping that tree to be like a chair, but then it's still a tree. It's just a more comfortable seat because you shaped it that way. I mean, everything's a chair if you if you sit on it. Everything's a chair if you sit on it. Unless you're sitting on the, you know what? I'm going to leave that statement. Even if you sit on the ground, well, the ground's now a chair. Like, if you remove truth from a statement, as in a chair is a object in which you sit on, you don't discuss the shape or the diameters or any of that, then everything you sit on becomes a chair. That just becomes this whole ordeal of just nonsense. Because sitting on the ground is sitting on the ground. You don't have a chair. You're going to get dirty. You're going to, like, there's values that you're removing just to make your argument. Now, I'm gonna end. I'm gonna end it here because I've pretty much said everything I'm gonna say for now. Um, but I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the light. Through Him, and only through Him, can you get into heaven. By His grace alone, not by your works, in order to enter into the highest level of heaven, which there is only one. I hope you all have a blessed day. Night. Or, yeah, it's still day.